What's going on, everyone, and welcome to my review of The First Omen, directed by Acacia Stevenson and starring Nell Tiger-Free, Bill Nye, Ralph Ineson, Sonia Braga, Maria Caballero. Ignore my pronunciations, please. And I'm actually quite surprised that I'm sitting here talking to you about this film today, because when I saw that this film was coming out and then it was going to exist, I basically just went, yeah, I'm saving that for the very end of the year, just to pad out my list. There is no way a 2-hour movie that is a prequel to The Omen, which is just another nun-horror film in a gothic convent, is actually going to be any good and worth me spending my time and money on. But here I am. So this film follows a young American woman who is sent to Rome to begin a life of service to the church, and she encounters a darkness that causes her to question her own faith and uncovers a terrifying conspiracy that hopes to bring about the birth of evil incarnate. A few weeks ago, I reviewed a film called Immaculate that I very much enjoyed, had some problems with, but I thought that it stood alone, it was very unique, it was interesting, it was something different, and it was very bold, and the more I think about it, the more I really appreciate that film. When I read what the synopsis was for The First Omen, I was like, this is just the exact same as Immaculate. And we'll get into that. But I was like, okay, there's just no way this is going to be any good. But then, early buzz happened and came out, and people were like, no, it's actually pretty damn good. With some even going as far as to say, really, really fucking good. Like, one of the best films of the year, one of the scariest films of the year, the scariest film of the year so far. And I'll warn you right now, take that high praise with a fucking boulder of salt, because it isn't one of the best films of the year for me. It's very good, very solid. It's not like a top-notch horror film. It doesn't come close to matching the original for me. It's not as good as some of the other horror films that we've had so far this year. It's very solid. I just would like you to get that into your heads. Like, you know, the buzz is just like, oh my god, one of the best, scariest, most intense, crazy body horror movies ever. It's not. It's very good. It's not game-changing. So, Nell Tiger-Free, I don't think I've seen her in anything else. I don't know if she's actually been in anything else. Her performance here is one of the most intense and engaging performances that I've seen in a film since Sydney Sweeney in Immaculate. And before then, it was a very long time before I've seen a performance like that. They're both very comparable. She's amazing. There is some people that have been comparing this film and one sequence in particular to Possession, which I haven't seen, but I'm very, very interested to, because it's Isabella Gianni. And that one scene, I know what scene they're talking about. And the scene in this film that kind of replicates that in a way, like Sydney Sweeney did in Immaculate. I can't help but compare the two films, by the way. I'm sorry. It's just that they're so fucking similar. Like, so similar that I just can't not. Like Sydney Sweeney in Immaculate, that amount of body, like, tension and strain that she must have put on herself to film that scene, it's just like, my god, she's great. And not even just that, even in her subtler moments when it starts out and she's obviously got this kind of innocence and, you know, welcoming towards faith kind of thing. But then she starts to learn things about her own faith and learns things about the people involved in her own faith. And the way she slowly but surely comes to terms with certain things, she does magnificently at. I think the Italian landscape was just beautifully shot. Like, it really looks like they weren't taking any shortcuts with this. They put some money into it. There was a lot of scenes where they're, like, you know, really showing off the best of Rome and just bits of it, and the architecture and certain things, and it really is great to look at. And I know that's like a common thing in films, kind of like, you know, nun and Catholic horror films, where it's very much, you know, these are these big abbeys or these big convents and stuff like that, or cathedrals. This one definitely does stand out for being actually quite breathtaking to look at the convent or the church or whatever you want to call it, the orphanage that it takes place at. This one really does look great, and it looks big and grand, and they really soak up that atmosphere. There's a really good sense of creep factor in this film too, which I was surprised about, because I think The First Omen... Can I just say, so First Omen, The First Omen is a terrible title, because you'll say, oh yeah, have you seen The Omen? Which one? The first one. Oh yeah, the one from 1976 or the one from nearly 50 years later? No, the first one. Which one? The first one or the First Omen? Like, so, terrible title rant out of the way, I just had to get that out of the way. What I meant is that the original Omen film, directed by Richard Donner, has this really just, like, sweaty, drenched feel of dread. Like, you really just feel like you are caked in it. And I think that this film did a really good job at somewhat replicating that. There is definitely a feeling that you get through it the whole film. I was never bored. I was quite surprised. I looked at the runtime. I was like, oh damn, that was 2 hours. That felt very short, but it never felt rushed. It just felt paced really, really well, really patiently, that just let you soak in it. But it never got to a stage where it was drawing it out too much. I think it was really well done. The gore in this film was used quite sparingly, but when it was used, I've seen some things in movies, and there are some things in this film that I have never seen in movies. And I've seen a lot of disgusting movies, and this film had some things where I'm like, oh, I have never seen that before. I think Ralph Ineson does a great job in the small role that he has. I love him in The Office as Finchy. He's great in that, and he was really good in The Witch as well, and to see him back in the horror genre is awesome. He was really, really great fun to watch. I just love his voice. His voice is so cool. And mainly for me, the one thing that I liked the most about this film was just the idea of the world that we live in. And even though this takes place in 1971, there are still some parallels that you could draw to that. The idea of faith and Christianity in like the Western world is definitely growing like smaller by the day. It's a slow but steady decline that you can really see. And what people of faith will go to, like what lengths they will go to prevent that, and just the idea that all the good in the world needs to have evil to survive. It needs to have the opposite end of the spectrum to be able to appreciate what's good in life. You need to have bad things happen to you to appreciate the best of life. And that's something that it's not outwardly stated, but it is implied with just the themes of good and evil and what these people are doing. And it's really, it leaves you with some things to think about too, which I really, really enjoy. I really do love the themes of this film and the way it's utilized as both like, something you can think about and as also like a story motivation, which is really good. I really, really love just very simple religious kind of things like, good versus evil. It's great. But now, as much as I did really enjoy this film, I can't just beat around the bush anymore, and I've barely even beaten around it. This film is so similar to Immaculate. Holy shit. Like, I was kind of like, thinking the first half an hour, I was like, this is really dangerously similar to Immaculate. And then there was some things happen. Some of the side characters kind of replicate some of the side characters in Immaculate. There's some scenes that, without spoiling, I'll just say there are some kind of like, shocking scenes that very much mirror Immaculate. The main character ends up in a sort of predicament, which is very much like what Sydney Sweeney goes through in Immaculate. And seriously, if you were to take the last 2 minutes of Immaculate and the First Omen are like completely different. If you were to just finish both films, roll credits just before it hit the final 2 minutes of each film, I would be positive that they were just like a remake of each other. Really, it's that similar. And I will admit, they're both done extremely well. They're both very solid films, and I actually can't decide which one I like better because there are kind of parts about each that I like both of, but they are so similar to the point that it's hard not to draw comparisons, and it's hard not to feel like you're just sitting in the cinema watching the same film again. I wish both films could breathe a little bit. I wish they were spaced out apart in months, even years apart. I wish that they were spaced out because they're too similar for the moment because it's crazy. Also, this film kind of just has the prequel problem, I guess, in a way. There are some parts where it's like, yeah, okay, that scene right there, that's very direct, just inspiration from the scene from the Omen. And it's like, yep, that's for the fans, that's to foreshadow what we already know is going to happen in the original film with Gregory Peck. and you know what's going to happen at the end. You know, it's got to pan out a certain way to make everything make sense in the original film, which is fine. But there aren't many films that can get away with you actually basically knowing what's going to happen at the end of them, and that's a problem that most horror prequels have. And I don't blame it. As I said, I think it's done well. It's just like even like the best of horror prequels, like where he's like Annabelle Creation. You're watching it and you're like, you know basically what's going to happen. They can do their best to subvert your expectations, but at the end, by the time those final 30 seconds come around, you know what's going to happen. It's the same with that. It's the same with the Red Dragon adaptation. I would say that Pearl is kind of an exception because it feeds off of the idea of the just bleakness of what you know is to come. That kind of works, but again, like, you know, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, it's just, it plagues every horror prequel basically, and it's not this film's fault. It's just what happens when you have horror prequels. And finally, going back onto that horror prequel kind of thing, the idea of like subverting your expectations, they do kind of attempt a bit of a bait and switch almost, where it's like, okay, yeah, that's fine, it works, but you were building up to something happening, and everything would have happened like that, and then the outcome would have been the exact same as what it ended up being. So it's like, you know, you were going down this path and it would just come evened out, but you were going down this path and then you just jump over to the side quickly and then it evens back out. There's no lasting consequences from that little surprise twist that's thrown in. It's just, you're kind of like, okay, you're trying to do something different. You're trying to subvert our expectations. It's just, why? There was no extra consequences because of that. It just kind of played out the same way as if it would have, if it had have just gone down the route that you're anticipating. It was just, you know, just a moment for them to say, oh, pulled the rug out from underneath you there. It's just like, yeah, but why? It wasn't shocking, and 5 minutes later it was as if nothing had ever happened. But overall, I did enjoy The First Omen. I do think that I will come to enjoy this film more in the future, and I think that time will do this film and Immaculate well, when you can separate them and view them both as their own thing. Even though they're very similar, once you forget how close they were released to each other, I think that you could view both of those films as being excellent in their own rights, despite very, very glaring similarities. So The First Omen, I would say absolutely put this one on your radar and give it a watch. So that's my review for The First Omen. What did you think of The First Omen? If you've seen it, let me know what you have thought about it, and if you did like it, let me know why you enjoyed it. If you didn't like it, then let me know why you didn't like it. And I will see you all later. Bye.